Budgets and financial overviews are some of the most common uses of Excel. It is likely that all of you will create budgets in Excel at some point in your work in the coming years. If you don't create a budget at work, you should at home. Budgets can help ensure that you are meeting your financial goals to save up for that new car or launch that new company. Most elements of a budget are the basic Excel tools that you have already learned or will learn later in this course. But there is a very important additional rule, especially when you are using modeling. Modeling in Excel is a little like fortune telling. It is trying to predict the future, but in the case of budgeting and financial modeling, you are predicting the future through careful calculations instead of reading someone's palm or looking in a crystal ball. Because we do not know the future, all modeling requires you to make assumptions. I might assume that for my budget next year, I need to spend 2,000 Kenya shillings for each chair I buy. But Nakumatt might increase its prices next month, so my assumption might be wrong in the end. The important rule of budgeting is that you must clearly show your assumptions. Now, let's look at this example of a budget that you were sent as the CEO. Your staff says that they will spend $5,600 in travel expenses next year. Would you approve this budget? I hope most of you thought no, because you don't know what that money is for. If they plan to use that money for matatu rides for 2 people, it is ridiculously high. However, if they are planning to several plane trips to international sales conferences for 10 people, this might be a reasonable amount. Now, let us look at another case of clearly showing your assumptions. In this budget, in my rows, I have broken down my travel expenses into different parts, so it is easier for a reader to understand my assumptions. I have travel costs for plane flights, for nights in hotels, and for taxi rides. Then I also clearly show my assumptions in my columns here. A total cost, which is represented by this column, simply is a calculation of the price of something, like for nights in hotels, the price of one night in a hotel, multiplied by the units in the next column. And in this case, it is 2 nights in a hotel, giving me 8,000 Kenya shillings in total. So once I include this information in my columns, the reader can clearly see where my costs are coming from. If my units columns says I will take 1,000 plane flights next year, my boss will know that I am crazy or I have made a major error in my sheet. Remember our first rule of Excel. You need to stop and think. Before you start building a budget, think through what assumptions you are making that your reader or boss needs to understand and make sure that those come out clearly in your table. Next, you will see in my budget here, I have a column for the total in US dollars as well as the total in Kenya shillings. This is an example of another common assumption that you need to make in budgets and financial models, though there are many, many more assumptions. We are going to use this example to learn another important concept in Excel, and that is absolute references. Remember in the simple formula session, we learned that you can drag formulas to new cells to save you lots of time. But we also learned that we must be very careful in how we use this because the formula can reference the wrong information if we are not careful. Let's recap what we need to be careful about. See at the top of my sheet here, I have a cell with the exchange rate between Kenya shillings and US dollars. So for my first budget line, I simply need to calculate my total in Kenya shillings multiplied by my exchange rate in order to get my cost in dollars. But now, if I drag this formula to the next line and through my full column, boom, I get errors because I am trying to ask Excel to drag the formula down for each row of the input. But there is only one cell with the exchange rate and it is up here. So I don't want Excel to move the formula down there. I want it to stay on this one cell while it moves the formula down each row on my dollars column. That is where our friend absolute references come in. I will undo my errors and then we will learn how to use absolute references. To make the input absolute or fixed, I go into the formula I have created in my first row and I will come to the formula bar here and then I hit Ctrl plus T. And what you see is that $2 signs have been added to the cell that is referencing, both here and here. Those dollar signs mean that the input is now fixed and will not change. If I want to change it back to being a variable reference that moves as I drag the formula down, I simply delete these dollar signs. Now watch as I drag my formula down to the other cells on my dollars column. Voila! It has changed my budget into a calculation in US dollars in just a few minutes. And then I will also do the same for my sum column. Voila! I will delete that because there's no figure in Kenya shillings there. Great! And that is how you use absolute referencing. I hope it has proved useful and you will be able to apply it in your own spreadsheet.